Today we are going to see a game played by World Champion Magnus Carlsen against Sergei Dolmatov, a strong Grandmaster from Russia, in the year 2004. Magnus, who is considered by many as one of the greatest chess players in history of the game, is currently the world champion, and this game was played by him when he was not even a Grandmaster. Let us go through the game and find out how Magnus attacked the opponent's king. Well, we are at the end of 5th move by Black. Black had just played bishop to f5. The position is normal, absolutely natural. Black has slightly more space in the center and has an extra central pawn. And look at white, how Magnus continues from here. He played d4. This is a great move. It not only contests the center, but this is also a pawn sacrifice. As we shall see, Black can capture a pawn from here. This move opens nice squares for the f1 bishop. It can go to b5, it can go to c4. While Black played knight d4. Many commentators after the game considered the move e4 to be a better defense, with the idea after the knight moves, Black could strengthen his center by d5 with a threat of h6. The knight doesn't have many nice squares to go, but of course it was anticipated by Magnus, who had planned f3. The subsequent complications would favor white from here, but let's not go into the depth of the alternatives. Black played the move knight takes d4. After the exchange, white took on d4. The queen is centralized and it cannot be pushed around by Black's pieces. Therefore, white has advantage. The only problem or challenge for white was bishop takes c2. White had sacrificed a pawn, but Magnus had learnt very useful lessons from the classics. He knows that in the opening, development of pieces are more important than temporary pawn sacrifice. So he had planned to play bishop c4, centralizing all his pieces as well as controlling the g8 square, discouraging Black from castling on the king side, with a probable series of moves like knight f6 development, castle bringing out his rook. If Black prepares to castle by playing c6 and d5, white would play check. With every move, white would bring out fresh pieces and attack f6 based on pinned bishop on e7. So this was a probable variation which Magnus had calculated. He had sacrificed a pawn. Now Black, of course, he continued his development. He didn't take the pawn. White played bishop c4, once again bringing out his bishop to a square from where it doesn't allow Black king to castle. Black played c5. The move c5 controls d5 as well as b5, and apart from that also Black plans to play d5 before castling on the king side if he does castle. But as we shall see, the move d5 does leave certain weaknesses, so white simply continued his development fast. And now Black played, instead of the planned move d5, he played b5. Let's see what would happen had Black played the move d5. White could continue his policy of developing his pieces, so bringing out his rook to the center of the board. And look at white pieces. Almost everything is developed. The next move, rook on h1 would join action through e1 square. And if black takes dc4, white would continue queen e5. Well, there's a discovered attack on d8 queen and double attack on e8 and f5. White wins back material with dividend. Perhaps queen e7 is the only move, after which white would recapture queen f5, and the threat of rook h e1 would leave black absolutely underdeveloped and in a lost position. So instead of d5, black played b5. White went back, and this is another very important position. Black played bishop e7, unpinning the knight on f6. He could right away plan something like queen d7 and long castle. It's worth noting that this is a sacrifice. If white captures the pawn, black could actually play bishop g7 with the help of this queen. The queen defends both f5 and g7, and suddenly black could actually take over initiative by either driving the knight back. These two bishops are very active, and suddenly by giving one pawn, black could actually come back into the game. But white would, in this case, simply castle on the king side, continue his policy of development. And if black castles long, white could actually reach out to the black king before black could reach out to the white king. So white's pieces being more centralized. Look at the queen, it aims a7. The knight targets here. This rook may become active on a file. So all white's pieces are ready to pounce on the queen side. In the main game, black played bishop e7, calmly developing his piece, and white castled, bringing his rook into action. Black played queen d7, and this is a position where I would like you to pause the video for some time and guess what Magnus thought in this position. Magnus played rook h e1, centralizing his rook with the idea, if black castles, which is the normal move, white would continue brilliantly with g4. Another pawn sacrifice. Notice the bishop cannot leave this square because e6 square is the weak point in black's position. Rook on e1 had supported e6 for bishop invasion. So this bishop has to maintain this diagonal, keep supporting the e6 square. If it moves bishop g4, white could play a small combination by capturing the bishop takes e7. Yes, it is simple because before the king escapes, white has to act and act very fast. So even Magnus, before he became a grandmaster, knew this technique and he sacrifices the next change, exposing the king. Now if the king takes the rook, white would continue bishop f6 and then rook e1. Check. Wherever the king moves, f8 or d8, white could recapture f6 with the queen. Therefore, black preferred to take with the queen. Look at the king. This is the real target. White played. Black would be in fact happy to exchange the queens if at once white takes the pawn. Black is an exchange up and he would be happy to exchange the queens by giving up a pawn. But white preferred to play queen f4, attacking f5 and d6. He would love to take d6, not with the queen but with the rook. Black played bishop d7. White played knight e4 based on the pin, and now the d6. So black is an exchange up, but his king is stranded in the center. The two rooks in the corner, they are unable to join action. Black played d5. So through this game, we saw how Magnus relentlessly attacked his opponent king. But first of all, he brought his pieces very fast. Just recall the moves: queen d4, bishop c4, bishop g5, bringing the rook next move and another rook next move. So without wasting a single move, Magnus mobilized all his forces and only then he went for sacrifice and attack. Timing is very important, and so is development. So that's all for today. Keep learning. Goodbye.